Hi, I'm Brian Whittemore of Itasca Waters, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the first Itasca Waters Practical Water Wisdom Series. We're honored that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to attend this session and to know that the subject of water quality is of interest to you. Itasca Waters is a local nonprofit that has been active in Itasca County since 2009. If you haven't done so, you can check out our many accomplishments on our website, itascawaters.org, in addition to accessing a treasure trove of clean water practices. But in brief, our goal has been to find grants to do research on local lake water quality and to do educational events such as these to share that knowledge. We're very excited to offer our monthly Practical Water Wisdom, a virtual learning series. We have an outstanding lineup of speakers through 2022 and hope that you will gain some new ideas and strategies for keeping our water healthy. We thank our partners for making these events possible, including the Grand Rapids Area Community Foundation Fund, Minnesota Sea Grant, Itasca Soil and Water Conservation District, Itasca Coalition of Lake Associations, Rapids Radio, KAXE, KBXE Radio, and the Blandin Foundation. Handling the question and answer section today will be Itasca Waters board member and manager of the Itasca County AIS program, Bill Granches. Just a few housekeeping notes. The format for this session will be this. Our speaker will discuss the science behind the topic, plus give you some strategies and practical actions that you can use as an individual, followed by an opportunity to ask questions. When it comes to the Q&A portion, click on Q&A at the bottom of your screen and type your question into the dialog box. Bill will read those questions to our speaker. Similar questions may be combined by Bill, and we may not get to all the questions if we run out of time. This program is being recorded and will be available for viewing online through our website, itascawaters.org, as well as on our YouTube site. And finally, as always, we value your opinion and hope you will complete the evaluation that will be sent to you by email after this session. Now let's introduce our first speaker, who has a most impressive resume. Dr. John Downing is director of Minnesota Sea Grant, which is located at the University of Minnesota Duluth and St. Paul. For more than 50 years, the National Sea Grant College Program has supported coastal and Great Lakes communities through research, extension, and education. It was established by the U.S. Congress in 1966. Minnesota Sea Grant achieved college status in 1985 and is a University of Minnesota system-wide program. The vision of Minnesota Sea Grant is to promote a present and future where citizens use science-based understandings of the environment to address issues concerning Lake Superior and Minnesota's aquatic resources and associated economies. Minnesota's Sea Grant mission is to inform and facilitate interaction among the public and scientists to enhance the communities, the environment, and the economies along Lake Superior and across Minnesota's inland waters. John is a professor in UMD's biology department and the Large Lakes Observatory. He is immediate past chair of the Council of Scientific Society Presidents and immediate past president of the Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography. Sorry, John, Oceanography. John is a charter board member of Itasca Waters and has a cabin on Wabana Lake, a cabin that has been in his family for over 100 years. John Downing, take it away, please.
Thanks so much, Brian. Really appreciate it. Such a flattering and kind introduction. And we'll work on the oceanography word. That's Brian is a brilliant announcer and it's wonderful to be introduced by such a golden voice. Thank you so much. As Brian said, topic today is clear information on Murky Lakes and how to keep those lakes Minnesota nice. And as Brian said, I am a lifetime resident of the Wabana chain of lakes, and my family's been on those lakes for about 120 years, and me only a part of it. I may look that old, but I'm not quite that old. and I do work across the state and actually across the globe on water quality problems. My entire career was built by growing up on the bottom of Wabana Lake, or and enjoying those Itasca County waters, and they were actually the inspiration for my entire career. So also, I just wanted to note that there's my email address, downing@umn.edu. I'm easy to reach. And if you have any other questions, follow-ups, I'll give you that address a little bit later too. So we're going to talk about water clarity, which is one of the most important aspects of lakes that that we try to manage in order to keep them healthy and clear. So if I could have the next slide, please. Yeah, so here are some of my friends on the left in a nice clear lake, having fun in that beautiful, beautiful water clarity of about 20-25 feet. And those waters are really enjoyable. They're really healthy. What you see on the right-hand slide is some of the green that's beginning to start in some of our lakes, even, well, around the state. And I'll show you something about that, but also even in Lake Superior. So whether our lakes are clear or they're murky is up to each of us, basically, and up to all of us. And we have a lot to do and a lot to say about keeping them in good condition. Next slide, please. Well, we Minnesotans love our sky blue waters. We like them in beer. We like them in lakes. And there's a beautiful lake. We love that beautiful clarity and that beautiful blue color. And I'll be talking a little bit about water color because it's so connected to water clarity. So we love them. They're iconic. They're beautiful. They're what Minnesota is known for around the United States. Next slide, please. So there is a challenge, though, and this is from some work from a friend of mine, Leif Olmanson at University of Minnesota. He's been looking at satellite imagery of lakes across the state and doing some terrific work with those satellite images. But what he's able to do is to see how water clarity has been changing in lakes in Minnesota over the last couple of decades. And the dots that are orange are lakes that are getting murky fast, and the dots that are red are lakes that are getting murky very, very fast, that they're losing their water clarity. And that round circle is our north central lake. So I think you can see that we're getting a lot of water clarity change in our region, which is surprising. The water clarity is being lost a lot faster than we expected in this area. Next slide, please. So, and the reason we really care about this is that everything is better in clear lakes than in murky ones. What's better? The health of a lake is better. Clear water makes better fishing. It makes better healthy ecosystems. Also, the health of people is influenced by the clarity. Clear lakes seldom spread diseases, whereas murky ones do. Also, the value of our land and value of our recreation is better in clear lakes. People seek and value clear water. In fact, in our area, a survey by Itasca Waters, or sponsored by Itasca Waters, shows that clear water itself is worth tens of millions of dollars every year to our economy in the region. Economics shows that value is huge to people, whether they use the water or not. It's important just to know that Minnesota is the land of sky blue waters. Fishing is better. We get better fish, we get more valuable fish, we get better fishing experiences in clear waters than in murky ones. Recreation is better. There is much more, the recreation is better and aesthetic recreational opportunities are more. Beauty, the sky blue versus murky green, brown, cloudy, clearly has an aesthetic appeal, and wildlife recognizes birds, mammals, plants, much more diverse and better around clean lakes. There is a real problem too that we want to avoid getting murky lakes, because getting murky water is pretty much irreversible. And I worked on fixing lakes and continue to in various places in the world. Fixing lake problems is nearly impossible. Lost water quality is hard to get back. And if you can get it back at all, it's very, very expensive. Next slide, please. So here are some classic murky lakes. These are green murky lakes. So I thought we should talk about what makes lakes look green and murky. Next slide, please. So there are three different main causes for changing the murkiness of lake, changing the clarity of lakes. First one is the one I just showed you. Lakes get green, and when they get green, they lose their water clarity. They get green from nutrients, and these nutrients come from septic systems, from lawn fertilizers, from agriculture, from stirring up bottom sediments. Now this is probably, I put a little icon on here saying most popular. It's not popular at all, but it's probably the most common thing that causes lost clarity in lakes. The next one down is one that is kind of a localized phenomenon, but still really important too, and that's cloudiness. And cloudiness comes from erosion of soils, and usually from too much development or poor development practices, construction, not enough plant cover on shores, and disruption of the lake bottom. And the third thing that's happening a lot, and I put an exclamation point next to it because it's happening kind of everywhere on the planet, and that is lakes are also losing their clarity due to becoming brown. This is from dissolved plant matter and iron and due to runoff and heat. So three main causes of destruction of water clarity. Next slide, please. So too much of three things make lakes murky and unhealthy. First one is too much nutrient, and this you may have heard of is called eutrophication, and this is because of a couple of important elements, and I'll explain why this works, why this happens. And these two elements are phosphorus and nitrogen, and they come from fertilizer, they come from sewage, any kind of sewage-like material, from septic tanks, from shore and bottom erosion. And even in our region, we're seeing a lot of nutrients in rainfall and dust deposition and runoff from clear areas. So too much nutrient is one of the causes, and that causes eutrophication or greenness of lakes. Another cause is too much sediment, and this comes from eroding shores, from lands and lake bottoms. And the third thing is too much brown staining. And this is generalized and quite common in Scandinavia and increasingly in our area. And this brown staining is called brownification instead of eutrophication. And this comes from increased heat or warming, increased drainage, storms, iron, dead plants, and other sources. So all those three things, those three drivers can change the clarity of water or cause lakes to get more murky. Next slide, please. So here's a kind of a conundrum. We think of green gardens as really healthy, but green lakes are not very healthy. And the reason that murky green lakes are not very healthy, there are several of them. One is that algae and weeds grow really fast and ruin habitat for living things that we care about. Another is that green lakes and murky lakes of all kinds tend to build up organic sediment real fast, and that buries that important bottom structure that's so important to the animals and plants that are important to us. Then that algae breaks down and decomposes, and it sends that fertilizer downstream when it lets go of it. And also murky green lakes have not very high production of useful fish species. And well, I guess, real green lakes have got a lot of carp in them. If you really like fishing for carp, that can be a real good thing, but most of us don't. Clear lakes have the production of much more useful fish, but it decreases as they get murky. Also, murky lakes welcome invasive species. And here I'd like to give a plug to the May 5 Water Wisdom presentation by Nick Phelps on aquatic invasive species, and he'll explain more about that. Murky lakes also stink, that's a technical term, and they grow poisonous plants. And there's a talk coming up in this series on blue-green algae, or what we call cyanobacteria, by Chris Filstrup on July 7. Another problem is that murky lakes lack oxygen for fish, and they exude gases that harm the atmosphere. Our lakes are healthy because we keep nutrients, sediment, and brown stuff out. Next slide, please. So I thought we ought to look out at a few lakes and see how they look and think about what actually changes their murkiness or their water clarity. And you look at this, like this is actually Trout Lake, the one just north of Wabana, that is classically blue. And the reason it looks so blue is that clean water absorbs all colors of light except for blue. And so when white light passes through water, it reflects the blue water back to the blue color back to your eye, so it looks blue. So this is why these lakes look blue, because they're bouncing this blue blue light back to your eye from white particles. Now, when light passes through clear water, passing through clear water bounces off of white chalk particles, the lakes look even bluer, like this, like Trout Lake, like blue water, and like places in Deer Lake and other places around our area. And I just wanted to add a little warning here that in these kinds of what I call marl lakes or chalky lakes, clearer doesn't really mean better. It might, in fact, mean that they're losing that characteristic coloration. Now, one little caution here is that some murky lakes can look blue to your eye in reflected light because it reflects the blue sky back to your eye. But that doesn't indicate really very good health, only the fact that it's under a blue sky. Next slide, please. Sometimes healthy water looks a little bit green when you look through it, and here's really crystal clear water, again, 20 to 30 feet of water clarity, and you can see a green cast in the water. It's okay to look a little bit green because this is from a mixture of that blue light that comes to your eye and a little bit of yellow from golden algae, and so that's a pretty healthy system. Next slide, please. But green lakes aren't healthy. Too much green is a bad thing, and here you see on the right green from a lot of suspended algae, and on the left a green from just an overgrowth, a massive overgrowth of aquatic plants. Water weeds and algae grow when people bring in too much phosphorus and too much nitrogen. Next slide, please. So you might ask why phosphorus and nitrogen control is so important to lake health. And on the right, I've got a whole bunch of disgusting images of stuff that has a lot of phosphorus in it. So, so if you kind of want to control phosphorus in a watershed or near a lake, these are the things you want to cut down on. So our lakes have everything needed in them to make tons of algae except phosphorus. They're lacking in phosphorus. Phosphorus is like the catalyst for growing algae in lakes. So as soon as you give a lake, because they've got everything else they need, the algae need, as soon as you give a lake more phosphorus, they spontaneously make tons of algae. So keeping lakes starved of phosphorus keeps algae and other plants low, and it keeps the lake healthy. The next thing they run out of algae when they start to grow big time is they run out of nitrogen. So keeping that out is important too. So all of these sources, there's feces and urine and soaps and detergents and fertilizers and soil, and even lake sediments have got a lot of phosphorus in it. The rainfall has got a lot of phosphorus in it and didn't used to. So controlling those kinds of sources is real important to keep that phosphorus from causing way too much algae growth. Next slide, please. So how much phosphorus does it take? And people ask me this, how much phosphorus does it take from people to cause water to get green? And this is a pretty picture of an Olympic pool. Olympic pool is really big. It's 660,000 gallons of clear water. Now, if you'll click the slide change again here, Chad, this is what it looks like if you put in 1 month worth of human sewage, phosphorus into an Olympic pool. So just in sewage, every person excretes enough phosphorus monthly to make an Olympic pool, a clear Olympic pool, green with algae. Now, more than half of the phosphorus that you excrete is, not to get personal here, comes out as in urine. The rest is as feces. And so, little crass advice, don't pee around lakes. Lakes are for fishing. Toilets aren't for fishing. But every person kicks out enough phosphorus every month to make a huge amount of water turn green. Next slide, please. So our green lawns, our agricultural fields, our cut forests also make water green. And so I thought it might be interesting to talk about how much eutrophication can be caused by a bag of fertilizer. A 50-pound bag of fertilizer that's 10% available phosphate. It contains 4.5 pounds of phosphorus, and that's the same as 36 months of a person's sewage, or enough to make 36 Olympic pools green and murky. So it doesn't take very much to change the water clarity and turn them green. Next slide, please. So another question is, well, what makes lakes brown? And this is like a bog color. And here's a picture of a brownified lake. And this is decreasing water. Decreasing water quality throughout the world. It's often caused by improved drainage, in quotes, meaning more drainage, faster drainage, due to ditching, also increased temperature due to climate changes, increased iron, increased organic residue. It's a tea stain kind of thing, and also exacerbated by acid rain and fast water movement. This changes the kind of things that lives in our lake, and you can illustrate that for yourself just by trying to go and fish in a bog. You're not going to find much living there. Next slide, please. Well, here's a lovely drainage example from Wabana Lake, from the boat landing at Wabana Lake in a rainstorm. The one thing that makes lakes really cloudy is the erosion of soils. And this is due to increased storm intensity. And there's a Water Wisdom talk coming up on August 4th on this for more information. But the other thing that makes lakes cloudy due to sediment is boats kicking up sediment. And that also helps to make lakes green as well as cloudy. Next slide, please. So the question is then, and I promised the education committee that I'd talk about what everybody can do, not just what is happening. And so what can we do to keep lakes clear? The simple answer is straightforward. We got to keep nutrients and sediment away and keep from running extra water into lakes. A caveat to all this is that we need to work harder than our ancestors did because of about 5 different things. Rain now contains lots of phosphorus, and so we're fighting that source of phosphorus. Rain also carries nitric acid that contributes to greenness of lakes. Water is warmer, so even for the same amount of phosphorus, warmer water will grow more algae and decrease water clarity more. Storms are bigger, so they wash in more stuff. And just basically, there's a ton more traffic and more people on the lakes than there used to be. So that's the gradient we're working against that our ancestors didn't have to work with. So what can each of us do? Next slide, please. I've tried to reduce these into 6 easy rules, and I've got little icons for each of them. First, secure your sewage, forego fertilizer, restore your shore, try to eschew or avoid erosion. One that I really like because how it sounds is should cover your ash. Cover your ash, ASH. Ash also has a lot of nutrient in it, and try navigating nicely. Next slide, please. So what do we do to keep away the green? Septic systems are, they kind of fall into 2 categories. One is sewage and other poop, and other important things that we want to keep do to keep things out of lakes. Septic systems only slow down nutrients, and they only slow down nutrients when the septic system is working properly. And there's a nice presentation by Sarah Hager coming up on June 2nd on septic systems. You got to keep those septic systems working, or you're running all of that nutrient into the soil very fast and often out into lakes. So you got to have them inspected. You should have them pumped out every few years. And there's another reason to do that is if you don't pump them out every few years, they're going to clog up and you're going to have to replace it. Also, your outhouses, keep them far from the water. Also, an old trick is to use lime, a bag of lime, to lock up nutrients. If you add lime to your outhouse In fact, it's going to bind the phosphorus and keep it from moving through the soil. More technical terms here: dog poop, manure, yard waste. Dispose of those properly. A dog poop particle can act like a time release capsule of phosphorus for many months. I know we all hate bird poop from ducks and geese. Chase them away and clean it up. That stuff is super rich in phosphorus, and once it dissolves, will cause increases in algae. Ashes, I've talked about that a couple of times. Move those far from the shore and distribute them in the forest, preferably covered so that they won't erode. If it's absolutely necessary to use fertilizer on your property around a shore, use zero phosphorus fertilizer. Use no or low phosphorus household products, because they're often really rich in those kinds of things that can destroy water clarity. There are lots of other important things to do, and I've given you a couple of links here that I hope you can follow. But vegetated buffer strips are really important. And when you're building them, use native vegetation. This is because it keeps the phosphorus from flowing across the land surface and into the lake. You should use native vegetation for these purposes. And the Itasca Soil and Water Conservation District is having a plant sale of those kinds of plants. Slow water down any place you can. And if you're interested in shore restoration, ask the Itasca Water Shoreland Advisors for some help. It's free and it's available, and they will give you some really good advice. Never mow lawns closer than 50 feet from the shore. And when you're thinking about views, think of selective viewing, not broad vistas. Those trees and tree roots are very important for keeping nutrients out of the water and keeping our waterways healthy. Let's not improve drainage, in quotes, by piping it into the lake. Use French drains, clean up yard clippings and residue, avoid burning, ash, and clearing of forests up to 150 feet from lakes. Leave sunken wood and water plants in place. This keeps phosphorus in sediments from being mobile. And let's keep invasive carp out. And please don't import bait, because that's a really easy way to get some nasty invasives. Next slide, please. Another way to keep away the green and the cloudiness together is to stop eroding soils everywhere. Use erosion matting and logs when you're restoring shores, and many of these are locally made. Route potential erosion away from lakes, and that means routing storm drainage to other low spots away from the lake. Use French drains or peat pits. And also, if you're designing paths and roads along shore, run them parallel to shore, not perpendicular. Now, another thing that is really of increasing importance in our lakes is the amount that we're digging up the sediments in the lakes. The picture in the background there that you're seeing with the lines across it is a Google Earth image of a sandbar in Trout Lake, again, the one north of Wabana. And you can see that just a few people don't seem to slow down when they go across. Well, eventually they'll slow down because they'll destroy their engine. But they were digging up really a lot of sediments. You should respect no wake zones if you're in less than 20 feet of water. You should keep your engine wash parallel with the bottom, not pointed at it, if you want to avoid changing the water clarity in your lake. And you might consider not using quite so much horsepower. The average horsepower of an engine sold in the United States last year was 130. Maybe we don't always need to have quite that much horsepower, because it's really a powerful impact on bottoms. Next slide, please. CYA, I say this just because I find it funny. Well, no, not just because I find it funny. It's because ashes contain a terrific amount of phosphorus. Not much nitrogen, but lots of phosphorus that can cause our lakes to become unhealthy. Ashes also contain a lot of toxic heavy metals. Ashes are caustic, like lye. In fact, they were the original source of lye for making soap and candles and stuff. And wildfires damage water quality. We're expecting a 5-fold increase in wildfire incidents in north central Minnesota by 2050. And those predictions are likely to come true. Most wildfires are caused by people. More people equals more risk. Fire control should be considered to be part of water quality preservation. Next slide, please. Thanks. It's not just about private land either. We got to be careful about overusing the open water. Be careful about digging up the bottom, or be careful not to dig up the bottom. And remember that everything you do in a watershed reflects on the lake and changes its water clarity. In urban and paved areas, there are special responsibilities, and you'd be amazed at just how much phosphorus can be kept out of lakes by cleaning roads and keeping fine residues from flowing into lakes. Our clear lakes are Minnesota nice because our watersheds hold nutrients and soil back. Next slide, please. I also have a special concern for primitive campsites and dispersed camping. They're really good opportunities, but we sometimes overuse them. This particular site, I have counted up to 100 people on this site for a full day, and there's one pit toilet. You got to wonder where all that nutrient goes, because those people don't just, not to be personal, but they don't stop excreting phosphorus just because they're having fun. I think we've got to be careful about what we do, do with our phosphorus output and our nutrient output wherever we are. Next slide, please. So, in summary, and to finish, our lakes have stayed nicer than most because geology, geography, ecology, and history have been kind to them. If we want our lakes to stay clear and clean and healthy, we need to continue to be kind to them, because once water quality is lost, it is impossible to get it back or extremely expensive to restore any of that water quality or water clarity. We can do this by following a few simple rules, and these rules can help us avoid loving our lakes to death. Secure all sources of sewage, forego fertilization, keep your shores restored in a natural state, keep sources of erosion low, keep ashes out of waters, and please try to navigate nicely when you're enjoying our wonderful waters in our region. And with that, I take questions, and I just want to encourage you, if there's something we don't get to, send me an email at downing@umn.edu or find me on the Sea Grant site. Thanks very much, and thanks again to Itasca Waters and the Education Committee for asking me to be part of this.
John, thank you very much. That was outstanding. I'd like to bring in Itasca Waters board member and manager of Itasca County's AIS program, Bill Granges, for the Q&A. Bill?
Thank you, Brian, and welcome everyone to our Q&A section of today's program. If you haven't already and you have a question, there's still time to get them in. Use the Q&A feature at the very bottom center of your screen, that little cloud thing there. The way this is going to work is that I'll read the questions out loud, and then they'll be answered by Dr. Downing. Now, there's two of us here, so we're combining some similar questions if there are, so we may not get to all of your questions. And if we don't, please feel free to email us after the program, and we can still get the unanswered questions answered for you. Okay, so here we go. Our first question. What impact does the underlying geology have on the lake's clarity, Dr. Downing?
Sure, happy to talk about that. We are pretty lucky. As I said, we've been lucky geologically because we have the underlying soils and rocks are pretty low in nutrients. It might be kind of different if we had higher nutrients, but what we don't have is a lot of stuff to bind those nutrients once we put them into the soil. And if you dig around on most of the properties that I've seen around lake shores, they're going to be sand and sorry, Bill. Did you have a comment, Bill?
I'm sorry, I forgot my mic was loud.
That's okay. I just thought you were jumping in and giving me a hand. Thanks. So we don't have a lot of stuff that binds up phosphorus and nitrogen once it gets into the soil. So if you consider your septic drain field, what you're doing is running nutrients out into the soil and hoping that they're going to be bound up by that soil, and the soils can only hold so much. If we had soils that had more calcium in them, for example, then we'd be able to bind more phosphorus. But the problem with that is, of course, that those kinds of soils aren't very permeable. So that's a kind of a double-edged sword there. So you can't push much water through soils that will hold a lot of phosphorus. I just like to underscore that when we use a septic system, that septic system only tries to bind up that phosphorus and slow it down as it moves. And it can clog, and you can eventually simply be running that phosphorus into a lake. So we have nice, beautiful, fairly permeable soils, but that means they're going to move water faster and they're going to bind less of it than in some other places. I hope that helps. I put in more if I've missed the meaning that you're after here. We don't have a lot of nutrients down there, nutrient-rich soils down there to run in. So most of the responsibility is ours for keeping from putting that phosphorus in.
Okay, thank you, John. Second question for you is, does air deposition make a significant impact on water quality?
Yeah, this is really a big growing problem. It's so phosphorus doesn't move as a gas, it moves as a particle, but it's also picked up by rainfall. And the phosphorus, when we had a project a few years ago in Itasca County where we were looking at nutrient loading to Deer and Pokegama lakes, and we measured the phosphorus in rainfall, and we actually found it to be really pretty high. And the reason that it gets pretty high is that dust that is transported from other places where there's a lot of nutrient. And if you want to see, if you want to kind of prove this a nutrient source to yourself, put out a bird bath or something, collect some precipitation and let it sit in the sun and see what it does. And what it'll do is it'll grow algae and it'll grow bacteria. And it does that because it's got a lot of nutrient in it, a surprising amount. Yeah, so nitrogen and phosphorus are both moved by rainfall. We're finding a lot more phosphorus in rainfall than we have expected. And that phosphorus can increase our challenges in keeping our water quality good and keeping our lakes from getting murky.
Thank you. And yeah, we really do need that rainfall to bring our water levels up since last year's drought. All right, next question for you, Dr. Downing. Can chlorine mitigate phosphorus in lakes like it does in swimming pools?
So chlorine is added to swimming pools basically to kill things that'll make you sick. And it really won't remove phosphorus from a swimming pool. But what it does is it keeps you from getting ill from the bacteria and some of the viruses that are released into a swimming pool. Chlorination of lakes would be a really bad idea. And we're actually doing it experimentally, not wanting to, by adding sodium chloride, which is another chlorine compound. It's real toxic. It's real poisonous to all kinds of things that live in lakes. So we really wouldn't want to do that. It kills bacteria, it kills everything basically. Chlorine gas does. So not something we want in lakes. Despite the amount of chlorine that there is in swimming pools, just a remarkable amount of viral and bacterial illnesses are still caught from swimming pools in spite of that chlorine addition. But it really doesn't touch the phosphorus at all. In fact, if anything, it would tend to cause you to have higher phosphorus concentrations. And then the only thing you could grow would be kinds of nasty algae that can resist chlorine poison. So yeah, not good. But thanks for that question. That's a real interesting concept. We often want to put stuff into water to make it better. In this case, keeping lakes from getting murky is keeping stuff out, not putting it in.
Well, we have some related questions to that one too. All right, our next question is, fire pits. Is there a safe distance from shoreline for a fire pit?
Yeah, I think it's not the fire pit. I love to have a fire next to the shore. It's really fun because you want to sit next to the lake and enjoy it. You're probably not mobilizing a lot of ash out of the fire. It's more what you do with the ash later. So when you dispose of the ash, you should get it away from the water. And um, in our case, we take the stuff back and distribute it around the forest. You're giving back nutrients to some of the trees that they actually gave up when you burned that wood. And so distributing that in the forest is an okay thing. You don't want it in a place where it's going to wash away fast and wash downhill into a water body. And it's not just the nutrients that are in it, it's the heavy metals and everything else. And it'll change the pH, changes the acidity really a lot. It's really, it's very chemically active stuff. But the fire pit itself, I think, is nice to have near the lake, but just maybe pick up the ash and get it away from the water.
Okay, next questions for you. Are there regulations in Minnesota regarding how much phosphorus can be in commercial lawn fertilizers?
There sure are, and they vary from region to region. And some of them that are marked as zero phosphorus actually aren't zero phosphorus. They're under Minnesota regulation, and I can't cite the law for you, sorry. But a certain amount of phosphorus can still be in fertilizer that's marked phosphorus free. You know, your best bet is have your soil tested and see if you actually need any fertilizer. And if you do, nitrogen fertilizer is probably a safer thing to put on than some odd mixture. But there are regulations. They vary from area to area, and maybe one of the board members knows more about those than I do. It certainly is something that should be publicized. And Bill, I don't know if in your office, if you guys know about those regs, but you know if they vary across Itasca County or not. But you know the basic rule, whether it's a regulation or not, that if you want to keep water clear, don't use phosphorus fertilizer. Don't use fertilizer. Chances are you don't really need it. Get your soil tested and find out.
Yeah. Okay, an invasive species question. Do zebra mussels really clear up the lake water? I'm sorry, it's clear up the lake water, not clean, but clear up.
Don't even think about this. I can see Bill is turning purple there. Yes, they will filter most stuff out of the water, so you won't have too much they'll take out particles. They damage everything else. And yes, they will clear water. And I have heard people, they're not something you ever want. They'll destroy infrastructure. They will destroy other wildlife. They will make fishing, they make swimming impossible. My friend Bill on this call could probably tell you tons more. But yes, they will do that. But no, you don't ever want them. They will cause all kinds of harm. And then the other problem that happens is they'll peak up high, and then they'll crash, and then they'll grow, and they'll release nutrients, and then you'll have a whole bunch of other stuff that you don't want to have either. So we really, and please check into the Nick Phelps is coming to talk to us about aquatic invasive species. We have Bill Granches locally who knows a ton about that. We want to avoid virtually all of those invasive species. None of them will assist us in keeping our waters valuable, healthy, and clear.
Thank you, John. I look at it as all a matter of balance, and we want things to be in balance, mostly the way Mother Nature intended them to be. And that balance does change slowly, but invasive species completely upend balance.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question, are there more lakes in the region that need baseline data for water quality? And is that important?
Yeah, I think it's enormously important. And I think, and I salute the citizen science groups that are out there taking second disc readings, but we could use a lot of, we could use phosphorus testing and nitrogen testing to some years ago, we had a project through Itasca Waters where we put together a lab over at Itasca Community College. We tested a lot of lakes. We haven't tested them in a while. We don't really know on the ground how they're changing, although we know from Leif Olmanson's work, just from satellites, that they are changing in clarity. I think, as with your health, you want to monitor your health. What do? You go in for an annual checkup and you take those baseline measurements, and then you see when things begin to, if things begin to go badly, you're in a good position to be able to react before it gets too late. So baseline data really important. We have not 1,000 lakes really in Itasca County. We've got about 895, I think, something like that. But who's counting, right? But but we have very little baseline data on these. I would say baseline data in things like phosphorus, nitrogen, water color, dissolved organic carbon, so we can watch brownification going on. We should know how much chlorophyll's in them because that tells us how much algae is there. And that there's a thing called inorganic suspended solids, which is just how much sediment is suspended there, that we ought to know about. And we should know about those with some routine, routinely, so that we can see when things begin to go badly. I put in a proposal to the LCCMR last year to reassess some of the lakes in the county. They didn't think they didn't fund it, but I will try to get that in there again. I think we need more baseline data, and we need repeated baseline data, just like we don't have to do it annually, but we need it like your annual checkup with your physician. We need to know how our lakes are doing.
John, could you touch on the use of fireworks over a lake?
Yeah, I can touch on it. It worries me a little. It's probably a small amount of heavy metal. The colors are created by various metals, and the residue falls into lakes. Dilution factors are probably really high. It's like anything. You get excessive with stuff and it can cause problems. Fireworks are so beautiful and so wonderful. We shouldn't use them to excess, but I think a small amount of heavy metals is probably okay. I looked up the science on this some time back because I was getting kind of concerned about it, but there isn't a lot of science done on it. It'd be nice to know. We don't want to add heavy metals too much. We got enough of them already. Actually, we've got more mercury in a lot of our lakes in our region than we really want to have. As I say, the colors that you see are due to the composition of those chemicals, and they don't go away. They just drop out. And yeah, I'm afraid I don't have any testing data on that, but I get concerned about an excess of anything. But they are sure pretty though.
Yeah, except when you find the afterworks floating in the cardboard and the metal sticks or wooden sticks floating in the lake.
Yeah.
That's only sometimes. All right, next question for you, Dr. Downing. What should I do when the reeds and plants along my shoreline are killed off by ice and wave action? What can I do about this besides removing them with a pitchfork?
Oh, you mean maybe a clarification there. The reeds build up on your beach or on your shore, or they're growing. I'm not under. You said when they're removed by ice and wave. Oh, you mean they're washed up by ice and wave damage? Once they're on the shore, they become what we call detritus, and it's sitting on your shore. I think you can remove them. The living plants, however, you really got to be careful because there are regulations. Those reeds protect your shore from erosion, basically. So you don't want to lose them. They actually will break down a lot of ability of the wave action and ice to erode away your shore and destroy the structure you have there. So you don't want to be without them. But if you've got dead stuff piled up on your shore, yeah, I would rake, and my feeling is to rake the dead stuff away so you've got a place to use the shore, but don't kill it. And if you there is some there are regulations about how much living plant material one can remove. My general rule is keep the shore as natural as you can, because that's what keeps the water in good shape. Don't be messing with it. The first, one of the strange things people do when they buy properties, they go out and they take out all the plants out of the water and all the dead wood that's out there, and that's the stuff that creates structure that protects the shore and is great fish and wildlife habitat. So it's real important stuff. So
fantastic. All right, we are running out of time. We have time for maybe one or two more questions, and the questions that were submitted that weren't answered, we will get back to you on those. Okay, 2 of the generators at the Boswell plant have been shut down recently, and the cooler waters downstream of the power plant on the Mississippi have allowed more ice to form in the winter. So can we assume water quality and color will be improved as a result of this change?
So more ice formation and cooler water. Okay. Less algae grows if water's colder. That is true, but I don't know what the whole net effect would be in that area on what kinds of nutrients you have available. The first driver is nutrients, and I don't know how those. I'm sorry, I don't know enough about that exact system to be able to help much there. Cooler water, however, will grow less algae. The algae will grow more slowly. And if it grows more slowly, then you'll build up less over time. And cooler water also will grow different kinds of plants and at different rates. But getting back to natural conditions is often a good thing. It's usually a good thing.
Okay, John, Dr. Downing. Last question. Your map showed water quality in lakes in north central Minnesota declining faster than in northeastern or northwestern Minnesota. Why is that?
I don't know the answer. I can speculate. One of the aspects that Leif Olmanson has brought up in his research is that he's also concerned about others of increasing temperatures. North Central has very rapidly increasing temperature, although you not notice it this year since ice out will probably be in, early to mid-May. But the temperature is a factor in changing clarity for a couple of reasons. You grow more algae if the water's warmer in the summertime, and you tend to have that water get browner because of pulling that color out of the forest and out of the watershed. So because we're warmer and we're warming faster than some regions, at least this is what Leif has suggested in some articles in the Star Tribune. You can look those up pretty easily. It's growing, it's changing. That's one of the reasons it's changing faster. Another one is, and then of course there's just the erosion question, because now we get about the same amount of rainfall as we've had, but it all comes in a clunk. It all comes all at once, and that means we get a whole lot more erosion. And we've got higher traffic in our lakes. We've got a lot more people using them, and that's good. I mean, it's great that people get outdoors and are enjoying those the waters, but of course, every person we bring into a watershed, and our use rates are increasing real fast in Itasca County and all of North Central. Yeah. So I would say, just to summarize, I don't really know the answer to your question, but those are some thoughts I have about it, and those are what some other scientists have talked about.
Well, thank you, Dr. Downing, and thank you all for all those great questions. Now, before I give this back to Brian and wrap up, I'd like to let you know about something in addition to this monthly series on first Thursdays. Tasca Waters is offering an opportunity to become an aquatic invasive species detector, or AIS detector. And you do this by enrolling on an online course that's offered by the University of Minnesota Extension and it was developed by University of Minnesota Extension and Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, MASERC. The Tasca Water offering is made possible in part by grants from Grand Rapids Area Community Foundation and the Blandon Foundation. Now, this course, oh, by the way, it's free. Normally it would cost you $150. This course is an introduction to aquatic invasive species, science identification, and surveillance. And this is the 6th year of this course. I remember I was in that first group of people that took it 6 years ago, and it is a fantastic course. If you ever want to learn anything about aquatic invasive species, why isn't clear water good as a byproduct of zebra mussels, things like that, this is the class for you. Now, if you have a substantial interest in Itasca County waters and you would like to learn more, go to itascawaters.org or use this QR code we have right here on the screen. Now, you should register as soon as possible, as there are 2 phases to complete this course. You have to complete 6 to 8 hours of a self-paced online study. Then and only then, after you complete that, there is a group online workshop. There's 2 of them that need to be completed. The first is June 13th. The second is on the 14th of June. Both are from 9 until noon. The class size is limited to 25, so register soon. Brian, back to you.
All right, Bill, thank you. Just a couple of things. As you've been watching this, you've seen a couple of other names on the side of the screen. Chad Manneke is the guy that's been running all the production slides, audio, video in the background. Thanks, Chad. And Stephanie Kessler has been the backup. She's been handling things in the background and is available if either I get out of communication or Bill did, but none of that's happened. So that concludes our program for today. I hope you enjoyed the first in our Practical Water Wisdom series. Tasca Waters thanks Dr. John Downing for today's program. We also thank Bill Granges for hosting the Q&A portion. Most importantly, we thank you for having the interest in clean water and taking the time to be in attendance today. A big tip of the hat goes to the Tasca Waters Education Committee and its partners for all they've done to produce today's program, as well as those to follow through this year. Today's program was recorded and will soon be available on the Itasca Waters YouTube channel, which you can go to directly or through our website at itascawaters.org. We will be emailing you an evaluation. We hope that you use it to give Itasca Waters the feedback it needs to make these programs even better. Our next live program will be at noon on May the 5th, entitled From Lab to Lake, Minnesota's Fight Against Aquatic Invasive Species. The speaker will be Dr. Nicholas Phelps, the director of the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center. And you can sign up by going to our website at itascawaters.org. I'm Brian Whittemore. Thanks, and we'll see you on May 5th.